Welcome to the Encouragement Engineering Podcast. We help people combat the negativity that inundates their daily lives with a positive perspective and positive action. Today's guest is Ryan Lindner. Ryan is a personal development specialist and author who has worked as a behavioral coach for clients in top organizations all over the world. After two sudden, unexplained cardiac arrests at a young age, he began to explore different perspectives with clients that come with any profound life-changing event. If you aren't living, you're dying. It wasn't uncommon for Ryan to teeter on unconsciousness, even at times while working with clients, requiring him to prioritize his own energy and time masterfully and assisting clients to do the same. Ryan has conducted thousands of coaching sessions, has led operations for major leadership and organizational change company, and manages learning and development projects for companies to reshape their customer experience. So please welcome to the show, Ryan Lindner. Ryan, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm excited. Thanks so much for having me.
Great. Well, I mean, a heck of a bio. It really gets people's attention. So if you can, let's tell the audience about you and how you got to where you are.
Yeah, I grew up as a hardcore introvert. Still am. It's not that like that changed, but that I'm certainly not shy. But I think a lot of people think that introverts are real shy. I think my clients would also be surprised to hear that because I seem so kind of upbeat during sessions. But yeah, very introverted, and I was just sort of drawn to wellness and the coaching. What that means and really helping people. I was a big people pleaser, had a lot of anxiety growing up as well. And I think that drove me to, as I was working out my own issues, I was really drawn to helping others in that way. So I've been in wellness for, my entire career, over 20 years. Okay. And, coaching was always something I loved. I specialize in transitions. So really, when someone is a role for many, many years, let's say they're a soldier and they're getting ready to retire, and then they go through that feeling of, well, I was this person for 20, 30 years, and then who am I now?
Right.
Well, you're still a person, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. You were a person before and you'll be a person after. And, your spouse doesn't call you sergeant, right? Yeah. So it's really exploring a lot of those issues that people encounter. And I also work a lot with busyness and people getting stuck with that. But given that I was so into wellness and, I was a vegetarian for several years, nutrition and really all on board with that. Funny enough, even managed a yoga studio for a couple of years, many years ago. But it was so surprising, when I had my first cardiac arrest, because it was really out of nowhere. I have no family history, and now, right. I was into wellness and fitness and all that. Wow. And, I was just walking along and suddenly I just kind of dropped. Basically, I looked at the person next to me, the woman, and I said, I told this to her actually. I said, I'm going down now, because I knew I had seconds left. I didn't think I'd have a cardiac arrest, but I knew I was going to lose consciousness.
Okay.
I felt my vision sort of close in, and it was more towards the beginning of a contract I had with coaching, and so I actually didn't have. I had my own small benefits policy, but I had no paid time off. I had no company benefits, and I was back at, financially, I was back at work 5 days later, and I'm hooked up to all these wires, right? And I start client sessions again. And what I found from then on was that client sessions were completely different, and I'd be listening to people, and to fill people in, I've seen world-renowned specialists. There's no one knows the cause. No one, the closest they can figure is I've got some electrical problems. There's nothing, right. But I have a pacemaker now. I had 2 cardiac arrests, and but when you're on a lot of my sessions at the time were telephonics. They were on the phone. So no one could see that I was hooked up to all these things. And I remember listening to this lady talk about some problems that she was having. And I was just thinking about just stay conscious, because my vision was kind of cutting in and out, you know.
Oh, okay.
It was terrifying, utterly terrifying.
Wow.
But it really did change sessions and change my outlook on problems forever. It really did. Well,
and that's what I want to touch on, because obviously something like that, a big life-changing event that changes your priorities, and it becomes front and center. Whether it's helping that other person or that key thing you want to do in your life, because you realize, hey, wait a second, something different could really happen. It's real. How did that, it sounds like it changed the way you had your sessions, you helped your clients. Is that how it helped you?
It did. It made me have to prioritize my own energy, because, well, that's really all time management is. Time management is really just managing your own energy.
Right.
And I have to. So a lot of people get lost down the rabbit hole and sort of the to-do list, and they're worried about what they're doing tomorrow and dropping the kids off, going to work, 5 meetings they have, and this and this and this. But it never ends until you make it end. You have to have. I work a lot with people on boundaries, and really prioritizing their own external and internal sort of wellness. And I have to, because if I don't, I actually get really sick and I feel like I'm going to keel over then, so wow. I have to get a certain amount of sleep. I have to keep the stress as low as possible. I have to, because then I have what I call, I'm dizzy 24/7 actually, but it throws me into an episode where, my blood pressure tanks and I start to have, feelings of passing out again. So,
right. Wow.
Having seen that, because a lot of people think, especially when they're young, when they're low 20s, and they think, oh, it can't happen to me, but
surprise.
yeah. And so seeing that, I have been better able to help people establish those boundaries and really take a look at what's important,
And that's, I think, critical, because our society seems to run at 900 miles a second, 20 different directions all the time, and here you're not that old, and yet this occurred to you. It really puts things in perspective, because any one of us, like you said, it's not like you were overweight, diabetic, or whatever. You were in pretty good shape, eating good food, this can happen to anybody, and it helps you to realize that difference. I find it interesting on your book. One of the quotes says, "What matters when you're running out of time?" And yet we're all running out of time. Can you fill us in on what was that thought when you wrote that piece of your title? I think that's great.
Yeah, it's so funny, because sometimes one person was like, I don't think this book applies to me. I've been, I retired fairly young and feel great and all that. But the point was, we're all running out of time, right? And we don't know. And certainly, everyone has their own opinions on the eternal life and this and that. But what I mean is your time as this physical person in this particular earth that we're on.
Yeah.
But it's really about, everyone thinks they know what matters, right? If you ask someone, they're not going to be confused. They're going to go, oh, my family matters, and I know what matters already. The problem is that no one's actually applying it. No one's actually following through. Like, their behaviors never reflect, what they actually believe, right? They know their priorities. They just don't do it. And the main title, The Half-Known Life, that actually came from a Moby Dick quote, actually. It's not what people think. It's sort of the inability to see ourselves, the ignorance of ourselves, sort of.
Okay.
And what I do, I work a lot with organizations now, and I do a lot of studies. And what I have found, I mean, I've had psychologists as clients, I've had generals, I've had doctors. What I've seen is that no matter how smart you are or what you've done, a lot of us, we just can't see ourselves and like the patterns, right?
Right.
Like whenever I talk to someone and they describe their busyness, like their stress, everyone seems to think that it's unique to them. And it is, it's their experience, which is true. But they don't realize 500 other people were saying the exact same thing, right?
Yeah, the world is a very big place. That's
Yeah, and but getting people to explore that. Okay, there's that saying, if you want something done, give it to a busy person. And my job is to really help people explore, hey, I know you feel this way and it's true for you, but let's explore, what does it mean to be busy? What is it? Most busyness is really just a series of micro decisions that we make on a daily basis. And
right.
so decisions got you to a certain life in a lot of cases. Things happen to us, of course, but a lot of times we've made choices. And so what choices can we make that will allow you to reflect what you say your priorities are? Because you never know. And no one comes to the end of life and says, wow, that was super slow. No
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and the realization is, like you said, is, if you're not living, you're dying. We're all dying. We're all, our clock is ticking. We don't have all the time in the world. And shifting to that priority, like you said, it's interesting, you finding in studies that people, it's kind of like they take themselves out of the findings. Oh, that's not me. Really? Is it really? I mean, come on, we all do this. And it's interesting how we do that. It's like that admission of, the same thing about writing a will. Nobody wants to do it because something might happen. Here's reality. Death and taxes are guaranteed in life, and change is guaranteed in life. Okay, it's gonna happen. So just put it out while you write it out, so you've got things squared away and you don't have to think about that piece anymore. It's amazing that that priority gets pushed back, because I've seen it where 19-year-olds are gone in a blink of an eye in an accident. Little kids, adults. So it will, it will happen. We just don't know when. But on a brighter note, how can you help people to integrate, if you will, that importance into their life, that prioritization of, betterment and improving, getting rid of that busyness? Because we all carry that around thinking we have to do everything. We don't. What are some ideas we can give to the audience to help with that?
Yeah, so I'm going to be really real about this. And a lot of people are looking for this like one thing, and it's like the golden thing. And, like,
You don't have the golden ticket?
yeah, I do actually.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of self-help falls short. I mean, there's some really good self-help out there, but a lot of it's just shelf help. It's just sort of sitting there on your shelf. And a lot of self-help treats symptoms, right? Like if you want to help a hoarder, yeah, I can send Marie Kondo and help, organize the house and clean them. But that person's going to hoard again in a week because we haven't looked at what's causing that. And, a lot of times with people, especially when there's the stress, the busyness and all that, it's just years of patterns and just habits. And it's going to take, sometimes scary, maybe courageous choices, often out of the comfort zone,
Right.
to change those things. And so the first thing is really just, we talk about, and I talk about this in the book a lot too, is, the inability for us to see ourselves. And so, what does it mean for you to be busy? And, if you are not willing to do something or get out of your comfort zone, or really do something about it, you're saying you're willing to carry that burden with you for sometimes forever.
Right.
So the question is, and the first thing people say when I make suggestions and this is the beauty of coaching, is you can't ever convince anyone of anything. They've
Right.
got to choose it.
Right.
And so I ask questions to get them to explore, because if you make suggestions, what people do is they just give you a list of reasons why it won't work.
Right. Right.
So it's important to say, okay, if you start to tell me why it won't work, then it's over. You've lost. Once you lose sight of, once you get into the if I'm going to do it or not, or if I'm going to try something, and you don't think about just the how, then you've already thrown in the towel. It's too late. So my suggestion to people would be, the first thing is really take a look at your life and just pause for a moment. And there's nothing broken. There's nothing, but what would, being yourself is not something you have to do. It's something you allow.
Yeah.
So what decisions would you have to make, no matter how crazy? What's your ideal situation? And work backwards. Start with your ideal situation. And most people will start, oh, well, I can't do that because I have the kids and the soccer practice. And okay, again, that you got to start thinking of the how here. And it's just a way of thinking, and having people, often it will take, in transparency here, it will take a big, courageous choice.
Right.
Sometimes scary, because people gravitate towards familiarity.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
And so oftentimes it does take that.
Yeah. And that's interesting, because just what you said there, pause. What? You want me to stop? You want me to slow down? And then, oh, look at myself? Or what? Wait a second. That's totally different than a lot of what our society does. But we need to do that. I mean, unfortunately, you had a knock on your door that says, hey, you need to slow down here. A hard one, and for those of us that may not get that right away, here's a suggestion. I appreciate you saying that, a suggestion to change your pattern, change it. And it takes discipline. It won't happen overnight by any means. It is important that we look at ourselves, that we look at how we do things. As soon as you said that about habits, I always thought of the old Chinese story about, I think it's a proverb about a master goes out and he shows this little boy about the oak tree. And he sees a sapling and he says, pull up that oak tree. Okay. Well, he goes over there, pulls it out. Then he goes down the way a little bit, and a bigger sapling, if you will, probably about 2 feet tall. He says, well, go pull that one out. He gets up there and a little bit, pulls it out. Keeps going down, and there's a bigger one that's a little bit bigger than the boy. He goes, all right, now pull that one out. And he goes there and he starts pulling and pull. 15 minutes later, all of a sudden he gets it out. And then they're going down the road and they see the giant oak tree. He says, now go pull that one out. He says, Master, I can't do that. He goes, that's what habits do to you. And it's because the idea that you've let it grow that long, that it's become that big, that strong. And we need to stop and look at that. I really appreciate that enlightenment for our audience, because that is critical.
Yeah, I think of it like I always picture it like a snowball and rolling. And throughout our lives, we collect all this mass, and some of it doesn't do anything for us, really. And then suddenly I look at my life and I'm like, I literally signed up for all this. And now I have to manage it. Yeah. Well, people get stressed with the managing of it. Yeah. So, I mean, you can live simpler, and there's a variety of ways I help people do that, but it almost always involves them seeing it in ways they hadn't before, looking at it differently, making choices that are sometimes uncomfortable. It might be a career choice. It might be a choice to move. It might be really looking at what habits do you have on a daily basis. And a lot of them, people don't even realize that they have.
Right.
I mean, I can name you a ton of examples right now that people, when I describe, even in their interactions, things they say, things they do, that they don't actually realize it until someone mentions it to them. Um,
And that's that perspective, that outside perspective. I think we need to be open to that scenario because we can
yeah,
learn a lot. You bring a much different perspective than me sitting in, in my forest, or I can't see the tree from my forest because I'm in it. Where you're looking from the outside in, you can see a different perspective.
yeah. And I'm not outside of that. I mean, can I see myself fully? No,
Right.
but I try to, but not, I'm just a person who's working on things as well. And I struggle with certain things, but um, the thing about a trauma is a trauma always pulls you into the moment.
Right.
Car accident, diagnosis, something, and then you stop and you go, whoa, whoa, whoa. No one has problems in the ICU. I mean, the problem is the ICU, but
Yeah.
no one's thinking about mowing the grass when they're in the ICU. They don't care for a minute, right?
Right.
And soon they get wrapped back up into the busyness. But once things are really clear like that, and you realize, you live in the how, and say, okay, well, how can I get to that point? What's my ideal situation? What do I have to do to get there? And you start really becoming aware of what is actually important.
Right.
That's the key.
Great. Well, and that guides us into another question I have for you, because you talk about mastering fear, and I'll throw worry on there too, because I think worry leads into fear. They're kind of in the same. Worry does you absolutely no good. Fear is a projection of future results that may not even occur. So what are your ideas on that, on mastering that fear? Because you talked a little bit about this idea that we're carrying around all this weight. Isn't that one of those weights we carry?
Yeah, I mean, most people live exclusively in the past or future. The past is like past pain that they're sort of carrying around, and then, or future anxiety.
Yeah.
And that was me. I mean, and in all honesty, it's not something I have mastered. I mean, I think some people, just the way we're wired, is just things come easier
Mhm.
for some than others. But fear is often just, you're never here, right? You're always in the future, and you live in often worst case scenarios. And what you find when you look at studies is most of the scenarios we imagine will happen, it almost never happens that way.
Right.
And I've had so many clients that have just been absolutely stuck in worrying, anxiety, fear, and then I'm thinking of one client in particular. She worried for like 6 months about this situation at work, and oh god, when my boss, her boss is on maternity leave, and when it comes back, such a toxic environment. And sometimes, actually oftentimes, things unfold in ways we can't imagine at the time.
Right.
And that was the case with her. Things actually ended up being better than she imagined. And then she had this epiphany where it was like, I just spent 6 months worrying for something that never happened.
Yeah.
And that's where we live. It's this mental noise. It's this chatter, this internal dialogue. And when we talked earlier about practices, it's really the awareness of your own internal dialogue that is where you start. And you need to form a daily habit where it could be any variety of things that you do, a meditation, a journal, anything, but it's really developing a habit to where you are aware of your dialogue, and you learn to take it with a grain of salt. You understand it. Like if I hear my internal dialogue go off, I'm like, oh, there I go again. And I just squash it right there.
Right.
Because it doesn't lead to anything that's actually true. It's just my mind telling stories, really.
And that's a good perspective. I had another person on my podcast that talked about that. And it's like you need to have, you mentioned the word dialogue. You need to have that dialogue with the fear to see if it's actually true. And like you said, 99.9% of the time, it's not true. So why, you need to question that fear. Why are you doing this? What do you think it is? And if you will, over time you can get quicker at it, but analyze why you're thinking that way. And yeah, most of the time, it's not true. And your chatter, that mindset chatter you talk about, can be horrible for people.
Yeah, you just gave me an idea that make a list of questions in a situation and ask yourself, what do I know is actually true about the situation? What do I actually know? Not assume.
Right.
What do I actually know? And I'll give you an example real quick. It's like when someone and their mind, the noise, it sort of runs away, right? Like someone cuts you off in traffic, right?
Right.
People are angry. And then they go through this like 15-minute internal dialogue about how this person's a jerk and you're cursing them and all that. And what do you actually know about this situation? Well, no, because what you know, they're mostly assumptions, right?
Right.
So this person cuts you off. What if it was a guy with a pregnant wife in the car and he's on the way to the hospital? Would that make you think differently of the situation? Would you have? Probably not, right? What if he just made a mistake and felt horrible?
Yeah.
I mean, we're human, right? But what we do is we spend time thinking about this person for no reason whatsoever.
Yeah.
And, I understand people, honk their horn sometimes. It's a great tool if it's like alerting something. But if you're holding the horn and it makes no difference, it's out of anger, what are you doing about this? What do you know is true about the situation? Because you are giving your energy to it.
Right.
And I look at life like, this is what I mean by manage my own energy. Everything you do has the cost of a thing is how much life it takes from you. And with everything I do, because I have to, like with someone cuts me off in traffic, I can't waste time on it, because if I worry like that all day, I get sick.
Right.
And so with everything you do, I look at it kind of like poker in a way. Like, how many chips is this worth? My energy, right? Like how much, like everything you do has a cost. And it's like, is this worth my energy? No. And then I drop it,
And that's always a great analogy, especially the traffic scenario, because you don't know what they're thinking, hearing, what phone call they just got, none of that.
Yeah.
And I do that often, and it's like, okay, am I okay? Yep. Is my car damaged? Nope, I'm good. The rest I can drop and leave it, and listen to my tunes and do it.
You're right.
Just continue on, because it's not worth carrying that over things, and even fretting about what might come. You don't know until it's here, so don't worry about it until the time comes, and then you deal with immediate situation.
Trust that you will respond appropriately in situations. Worrying won't help. Trust that you will respond appropriately. And even if the guy cut you off in traffic, let's say he did it on purpose and he was a jerk. Let's just maybe.
Yeah.
So by being upset with him, or by giving him a piece of your mind, what lesson exactly do you think you're teaching this person who is he's not gonna suddenly be like, oh man, I'm gonna change, I'm not a jerk anymore. It's still not worth it, right? It's just not worth it in any scenario.
Yeah, definitely not. Well, one of the other things you talk about is remastering your busyness. Tell us about that, if you would, because that's a big one in today's society, is that busyness. And you talked a little bit about it. Tell us some more about how we can do that, or suggestions on how we can reduce that busyness.
Yeah, this is interesting because everyone wants that lower stress level and to reduce their busyness. And, you hear a lot of things about people being minimalists and reducing, and that's all great because, it's reducing that mass, as I call it. There's fewer things to manage, and things become easier. So I'm not going to go through a lot of those things because a lot of people have heard those types of things before. But the busyness, again, it's really going to take a total change in your life and in the mass that you have, and only decisions are going to get you out of that. And if it's decisions and actions, and even if you can't reduce people, I can almost hear them say, well, I got this to do and that to do. Okay, it might take a little time too, but you can also do this internally. And it's really, again, it's about that worrying. It's about the mental chatter. It's about how you respond, not react to situations. Most people are very transactional.
Right.
They're not interactional, right? So everything in their life becomes this like transaction. Everything is a means to an end. You go to 7-Eleven and you get a drink and it's like, here's the money. Everyone's a role, right?
Yeah.
And so in order to get out of that and slow down a bit, you've got to you've got to pause. You've got to slow down. You can slow down regardless of what your situation is. It's in your head. That's where it starts.
Yeah. And you bring up such a critical point. And audience, for those of you that know me, you're saying, Bob, you should be hearing this. I'm hearing him, because that's my biggest thing is I've got to learn to slow down. And there's many times where it's just stop. I've got to tell myself, stop. It is more than just a, transaction or making that next light or making sure I'm walking fast enough to get to this meeting or whatever. Yeah. Thank you for that reminder and right in my face, because I need it. I appreciate that. So well, you've written a book. Tell us about that, and then if you can, let's let the audience know about where they can get a hold of you. But tell us about your book first.
Yeah, so it's called The Half-Known Life. And it's really, again, about not the kind of the inability to see ourselves. And I talk a lot about, coaching experiences with different clients, what happens, and really what is real and true in our lives. And it's a lot of times the things that maybe we can't see. And the goal is, that it's maybe a catalyst perhaps, or something. If just something in your mind is triggered,
Right.
that kind of gets you to look at something different, then that's a win. So they can check more about it on my site, which is rslindner.com. It's RSLINDNER, rslindner.com, or my book site, which is halfknownlifebook.com.
Great. And follow up with Ryan if you have questions, because his website is I appreciate the pictures on it. It's very soothing. And I like that because it does, you look at it and go, okay. Whether you realize you did that or not, I don't know, but it does do that. I think it's good. Check out his book. We can all get some good information off that idea of realizing who we are, slowing down a little bit. We don't want to have to go through some of the scenarios you went through, and we're glad you're here to share those experiences with the world and help us to see that betterment of, that transition and that taking our time to pause and see the bigger pictures in life. So thank you for doing what you do. And Ryan,
my pleasure.
Thanks you for being a guest on the Encouragement Engineering podcast. I really appreciate it. Really appreciate your time today.
My pleasure. So great to be here.
Thank you.